Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. People who rent out their personal property, Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, what are your customer horror stories? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Lyft driver here. Got pulled out of my car at gunpoint by like 20 cops because the guys I picked up matched the description of some guys who had stolen a car. It wasn't them. Ran an Airbnb for a year. 4 clean-cut frat boys had a 7-day stay. When they checked out, I sent my usual "hope you enjoyed your trip" text, and they responded that the toilet hadn't been working for their stay. They could have told me this on day 1, on hour 1. Instead, they used the toilet for a full week. There was a mountain of poop. A mountain. I took the toilet tank lid off. The chain had come loose. 4 men, in their 20s, didn't know how to attach the toilet tank chain. Forever and ever, for the rest of my life. I will feel smart, even though I'm the dummy who had to shovel poop mountain into contractor bags. I drive for Uber or Lyft as my sole means of income right now. It's never a dull moment. I've done about 1,600 rides with Uber and close to 1,000 with Lyft in 1 year. Most passengers are awesome. I never have issues, even with drunk people. One night, though, this drunk girl and her drunk friends get in the car and are acting really obnoxious. I even joined in the banter a little bit to keep the ride fun. Going down a dangerous road at about 45 miles per hour, the girl sitting behind me reaches forward and covers my eyes and pulls my head back against the headrest, jokingly saying something about, "What time is it without looking? Game over." I was pissed. Lucky for them, we weren't far from their destination. Otherwise, I would have left them on the side of the road. I pulled over after dropping them off and left a lengthy complaint with my Lyft about dangerous passengers. A friend had their car on Get Around, got it back, and second gear was gone. GPS tracking showed it at over 120 miles per hour multiple times. It was dirty and smelled like weed. In fairness, Get Around got the transmission fixed, and they were all squared up after, but the car is no longer on Get Around. I used to drive for Uber Lyft. Had some bad ones, usually the very drunk, but for the most part everything was great and went very smoothly. My horror story came from a ride I gave off the books, as it were. Pulled up to a pickup location, the girl comes out, the one who ordered the ride, and explains she ordered it for her friend. The card connected to the account has no money on it, but she offers me $20 for the ride in cash. Whatever, I needed the money, and the spot she said her friend needed to go to was relatively close. It would have been well under $20 if it was charged through the app. I agree, and she signals to this very tall guy who walks down from the porch. Red flags were already going off. This guy gets in the back and we take off. I consider myself a pretty social and outgoing person, and soon into the ride, this guy and I are talking about all sorts of things, from basketball to movies, as well as our disdain for traffic in the large city we live in. 5 minutes or so of this, and he brings up his love for firearms, next red flag, and asks if I own any. I don't, and inform him as such. He then proceeds to pull out 2 handguns from his backpack, explaining how he just picked them up the other day and loves them, even flashing them to me in the rearview mirror. I'm fully freaking out internally, but I keep my cool as we're nearing the destination. As we pull up to this guy's house, he explains that he's a drug dealer and that he really enjoyed our conversation and thinks I'd make a great driver for him as he makes his drops. I explained that I'm not interested, but thank him for the compliment. Unfortunately, he was fairly insistent I start working for him and would not exit the car till I gave him my phone number. He somehow bought the fake number I gave him and told me he'd call me soon. As soon as he was out of my car, I took off. That was one of the last nights I drove for Uber or Lyft. If the number I randomly gave out actually belongs to anyone, I apologize if you got a late night call. From Tim. Picked up a guy in Hollywood at 1 a.m. who wanted a lift to the valley. I became increasingly concerned as we drove up into the hills. He told me to turn into a completely dark nature reserve. He told me that his girlfriend was a land use manager for the park and he was going to stay with her overnight. We drove through the dark, winding roads of Fryman Canyon, and I honestly thought he was going to kill me. There was also a car following us. Turned out, he was right. His girlfriend did live out there, and I wasn't harassed at all. The car following us was a park ranger, wondering what the heck I was doing out there so late. Some little shit shot BBs through our bathroom doors. We know which family did it too, but they denied it, and we have no proof. Those parents knew damn well their kid did it too. I'll never understand why they couldn't act like adults and own up to it. Not a horror story, but frustrating. I have an Airbnb rental in a small ski town. One of our first guests was a single guy who brought a Shih Tzu. He stayed for one night and left a 1-star review, saying there was no silverware in the house. There are literally like 40 of everything. The power went out across half the mountain due to an ice storm, and he was bored. And finally that he was disappointed that the fridge wasn't stocked. It clearly says on our listing that food and drink are not provided. Here's the kicker. The next guest that came in went to clean some mud they thought they tracked into the house, ended up being dog shit from the asshat's Shih Tzu. This wasn't me personally, but I helped my boss manage her Airbnb. First off, she was running it illegally. The city I live in, a lot of apartment buildings don't allow it. Anyways, this girl rented it out for a week in December last year. My boss is out of the country and gets this call that her fob has been deactivated due to damage to the property, and the fact that a brothel was being run out of her apartment. This woman and her friend were literally f***ing dudes all over this place. One guy got mad, left, and punched a picture in the foyer, which was caught on camera. I got a call to be on standby, but the police went in and did their thing. There were baby wipes and used condoms everywhere, literally semen everywhere. She got a pretty hefty fine for the damage and also for the fact that she was using Airbnb to rent out her condo. I rent out a rustic cabin on my property. The setting is really nice and serene beside a creek, and there's a cedar sauna on the property as well. But the cabin is small. There's a queen bed in the loft and a double futon on the main floor, and its dimensions are roughly 12 feet by 10 feet, so I tell people to max is 4 people per night. Well, this young guy messages me and asks if they can have 7, promising they'll be really respectful and clean, and I work with someone the guy knows, so I cave. They left the place kinda clean, but burned a hole in the hardwood floor and broke the handle off the sliding glass door. Turns out with that many people cooking, etc., the humidity in winter caused some moisture condensation on the track, which subsequently froze, and instead of just leaving it and letting me know, he forced the door closed, breaking the handle in the process. Not an easy feat. Hurt his hand as well. He was sure to let me know code for, "Don't take my damage deposit or I'll sue you." You can bet I never let more than 4 in there now. I drive for Uber. I got a pickup for one of the satellite buildings of a local hospital. No big deal. I picked up and dropped off people there before, and I had never had an issue. As it turns out, the department I was picking up from was the rehab clinic for the area. As you may or may not know, there's a 5-minute wait time for the moment we arrive. The app determines it, not us, to the moment when the driver can simply cancel and collect the cancellation fee. For obvious reasons, we tend to keep a sharp eye on the clock. The time was getting close to the 5-minute mark when I got a text. A nurse or doctor on the inside was using Uber to transfer a patient. Okay, still no big deal, I guess. About 10 seconds later, some bedraggled guy comes out, a bit unsteady, and asks if I'm here for the doctor. I said yes, and he said that he was the transfer. He got in and I started the trip to the rehab clinic, which was about 70 miles away to another rehab clinic. Now, long trips are my jam. I get paid well for them. They're easier and less stressful than a bunch of little trips, so I was pleased. Not 2 minutes into the trip, he was like, "Hey man, I don't really want to go there. Take me over there instead." He wasn't asking, he was telling. Already I'm uncomfortable and decide it's easier to just do whatever the guy wants rather than stick to the requested destination. He can't pick out exactly where he wants to go, so he just starts telling me to turn onto random streets. Some point during this adventure, he asks me how much cash I had on me. Red flags all around now. I tell him I don't really carry cash. He sighs, says, "I was really hoping for at least 15, and pulls out a small knife. So now I'm panicking and pulling out my wallet at the next red light. I had $5 from someone who tipped me earlier that day, but nothing else. He took the bill and told me to keep going. Christ, I'm shaking a little just telling the story. We arrive at what I assume is a drug house. Guy tells me to wait for him and gets out of the car. Okay. I can only assume that he was desperate for his next hit or whatever, and so didn't really think that through. I shut and locked the door and took off as soon as he was across the street. Went home, reported it to Uber. I didn't file a police report because it was only $5, and Uber said they'd take care of it. I don't really believe it, but I didn't really want to deal with anything else that day anyway. Every once in a while, I romanticize the idea of doing some type of airport shuttle service in the part-time to grab a little extra cash. And then I read some of these stories and I'm like, yeah, no, I'll just keep grinding. Glad you made it all right. Not so much personal property as it is my experience working in event planning. There were customers who would rent our equipment and treat it as if it were their own. And then there were people who outright abused our stuff. The worst experience that comes to mind had to do with a caterer who had consistently rented from us. He was hired for a wedding reception on a ship and asked us for wine glasses, plates, linens, and the like. After that weekend, we received less than half of our stuff back, or it was broken. The wine glasses were thrown into the box they were delivered in, and most of those were destroyed. The same went for the plates, but we did recover most of the linens, not all. My boss told the caterer he was going to be charged for the broken glasses and plates, and he immediately assumed no fault. Well, dude, don't call us frauds when you sign a contract clearly stating that you agree to reimburse us for damages. He tried disputing it with his credit card company, but we won out. My boss bought the house behind mine and turned it into an Airbnb rental. Once some people rented it and just gave it to their teenagers who threw a rager. I started hearing lots of car doors slamming and hearing kids walking right past our windows, 20 feet from the sidewalk, so cutting in our yard. It got insane fast. And apparently the cops just made all the kids leave and told my boss to throw away all the drugs and alcohol they left behind. I had to clean up a lot from my yard too. Shortly after that, someone rented it and threw a wedding in the house and basically destroyed it. They dumped pots of food everywhere and he had to spend thousands of dollars cleaning it. They burned carpets and the whole place stank. Last I heard, he was still renting places out. I rented out a newly remodeled home after getting married. I used Renter's Warehouse as a property manager. They found tenants immediately, and the move-in was painless. 2 weeks later, things started to go south. First a toilet broke, then another toilet broke, then a pipe disconnected. The rate of failures was occurring so fast that my $65 home warranty trade calls were exceeding my income from the property. 1 month later, my pool guy sends a text. Something doesn't look right at your house. No power. I contact the property manager to verify it was paid. It was not. I requested a 24-hour inspection to view the property. When I arrived, it was worse than I imagined. There were holes in the interior and exterior walls. Someone walked around the house with a can of paint and put a postcard-sized amount of paint on every single wall. They stole the basketball hoop. They marked every drawer and closet. They gouged the door frames. Irrigation lines were cut. Almost every plant outside was dead. In the end, everything worked out. Although there was almost $10,000 in damage and unpaid rent, I was able to find renters on my own who agreed to paint and repair the property in exchange for 1 month's rent and 50% off all deposits. They post everything on Facebook, and it looks fantastic. I rent my pad close to the beach on Airbnb. Every year there's a music festival, and I stay clear of it. Last year I forgot to lock the dates and got an instant booking. They said they were 8, they were 11. They didn't have enough garden furniture and took the mid-century modern-style chairs in the garden. Then they left for the concert, and it rained. 1 star. A friend I was with received a call from a distraught old school buddy who lived in a rural town, who had just driven past her rental house to find the cops raiding it. So she stops her car naturally to find out what is going on. Turns out the renters weren't even living in the house. They were growing weed in every room and knocked out bits of the ceiling and walls to feed their hydroponic system setup. Sorry, bad explanation. Basically, the house was wrecked and filled with holes, but they managed to arrest the fake tenants. The school buddy was upset and rang her friend, who I was with, to unburden herself as she was literally standing outside her car going, "What are they going to do next? Police." And holy shit. It was like a play-by-play description. I used to drive for Uber in a tourist town. I had a group of 40-ish-year-old men one night I was taking downtown from their Airbnb. It was one guy's birthday, and he kept telling me I was cute. When we arrived at their destination, he kept asking me for a kiss because it was his birthday. I told him to get out of my car before I tasered him after the third no. I reported the incident to Uber, but they didn't seem to care. Not my personal story, but my friend and his fraternity just rented out an Airbnb this weekend for one of their formals. It was in a small mountain town, so the house was fairly big and fit in quite a few people. However, everyone brought a date, so I imagine there were at least 15 to 20 people who ended up staying. Anyways, everyone was heavily drinking all weekend, and one girl was dancing on the countertop, somehow jumped onto the stove and smashed through it. She was literally standing knee-deep in the oven. Most things in the house were broken, and even the hot tub was left brown by the end of all of it. Oh, Greek life. I would hate to be the father of the men who used his credit card for the reservation. Obligatory not me, but my mother. She rents out her big, beautiful house, and her tenants grew weed in the attic. Ruined the attic, broke open the meter, which is illegal over here and you get huge fines, got caught, had a long talk with her. She decided to give them another chance, and they did it again. Second time, they got caught. The city almost closed her house for 6 months, would mean no rent, would mean my mom going broke, living in a tiny house on welfare herself. They trashed the property. Not just a mess, but broke a lot of it too, and disappeared completely. They left a huge mess, and big part of the house that was beautiful, well kept, in a good neighborhood, you get the picture, was ruined. She had tons of work cleaning all of it up, and lots of enormous bills for repairs before it was back in a semi-decent state and she could rent it out again.